Welcome, everyone, to the 100 Monkeys of Hope podcast that Chrisna and I are putting together. It's a little way of reflecting on our Designing for Hope book, which is 10 years old now. And so we're giving it away free electronically, information in the show notes. Today, we're talking about biophilia, and particularly in this section where we're exploring the role of nature in our regenerative development journey. And we're starting with biophilia because biophilia gives you the way in for people to start valuing nature. Nature is something that research has shown us we actually need. Just think about COVID and how precious those outside moments were. And so we reflect on what is biophilia, how does that contribute to a regenerative journey, what does it mean for design, and reflect on some of our experiences as we went on our journey to writing this book. So strap in, enjoy the journey, and give us some feedback. Hi, Krishna. Lovely to see you.
Good morning, Dominique. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, it's getting darker here, so excuse the fading background. I'll try and do something with the lighting next time.
As you can see, I've got some lovely winter sunshine starting to come in.
Sure. Yeah, I was thinking about the seasons and so forth as I was thinking about my acknowledgement. And here we're entering the warring season, which is when the wombats come out and are ambling about. And for many Indigenous groups around this area, this is a marker for a particular seasonal change from autumn moving more into the winter type season, and has a lot of stories attached to it, celebrations and actions connected with their way of life. For example, one person shared with me that for them and their people, this was the right time to start burning. And so they would do a slow burn. It's winter, it's cool, the ground's wet. There's still a bit of dryness in the leaves of things. And so you get a slow burn, which then prepares the country for growth, new growth in the spring seasons. And that, again, like we reflected last time, just connected me with that deep relationship and seeing patterns in the land and how the seasons then indicate how you should manage yourself and the land. And in that relationship, yes, we are changing the land and we are being changed by the land. And I think that is a really nice starting off point for this whole section on our relationship with nature and its influence in regenerative development.
I think it's the whole section in this particular chapter is about how do we establish that connection? How do we reconnect? I've been reading quite a lot around this concept of personal rewilding. So it's not just rewilding the landscape and restoring it in some ecological way, but also about the rewilding of the South. And in this quest, I came across a lovely poem by, it's an environmental lawyer in South Africa, Ian McCallum. And he says that, have we forgotten that wilderness is not a place, but a pattern of soul, where every tree, every bird and beast is a soul maker? Have we forgotten that wilderness is not a place, but a morning feast of stars, footprints, scales, and beginnings? Since when did we become afraid of the night, and that only the bright stars count? Or that our moon is not a moon unless it is full? By whose command were the animals, through groping fingers, one for each hand, reduced to the big and little five? Have we forgotten that every creature is within us, carried by tides of earthly blood, and that we named them? Have we forgotten that wilderness is not a place, but a season, and that we are in its final hour? And for me, it touches on so many of these themes that comes up in biophilia, of understanding that we humans have this innate affiliation and need to affiliate with nature, and that we've forgotten what that is. So we end up, we name things, we give them spaces, we give them values, but we've forgotten that we are such a part of it. I think that's what the biophilia hypothesis makes such a convincing argument for us in terms of how we move forward with this kind of a reconnection. And I really enjoyed the time that we spent with Stephen Kellett explaining these kind of concepts to us, and explaining that biophilic is there's different ways for us to make that biophilic connection and reconnection. And parts of it is through the buildings we create, but parts of it is also through the education that we give. I was thinking particularly, not of the buildings that he was talking us through, but of the Cheyenne Children's Garden. You remember that, Dominic?
Oh, yes, yes, magical, magical place, and so unexpected, wasn't it?
Yes.
For me, the magic in it was in its humbleness and in its the things that the community did together, and then particularly that moment of mystery and all of those beautiful biophilic aspects where we open the door and we enter into this little garden, little protected space where you just felt held and secure. But then you had this little curtain you could open to peek into the rest of the garden. So that for me was really a poignant memory. What about you?
I think, yeah, for me, with that, it was the way that it brought magic back into children's lives and connected that sense of possibility to the sense of wonder and the idea that we have agency in many ways to reconnect and to be a part of this wonderful experiment that's life. And just and the playfulness of it, that it doesn't have to be serious. And in fact, the
Absolutely.
more playful we are and the more joy we bring into it, the easier it is to make that connection.
Oh, yes. And don't we forget that all the time. Even probably, as you were saying, reviewing five PhDs and trying to get them through the last minutes, where is the joy? Where is the celebration? Where is
Yeah.
that sense of magic in what you're doing? We have stamped it out of our processes, and that is another magic part of this biophilia hypothesis. And it's also, I'm just reflecting, it's in our relationship with nature that joy can happen, right? Biophilia is really a descriptive word about our relationship to nature and our innate need to be connected to nature. And part of our relationship with that is that ability to see wonder, to feel joy, to
Mm.
watch a sunset and connect and feel energized by that. So
Oh,
I found biophilia in my work has always been a very tangible concept to use to bring people to the concepts of regenerative development and bring people into the value in nature for us from a very
mm,
anthropocentric perspective, right? Very biased towards our benefit. But it is a way to open the door for people to start valuing nature and to
mm.
take it that next step, which is why we put it where it is in the book, right? If you remember those conversations about the orders, I think we
Yeah.
sat around your table and drew a tree and tried to work out how the chapters were parts of the tree and so forth. And that concept of biophilia seemed very anchoring, seemed very pragmatic, a tool that
Mm.
people can begin with.
No, I think it was a flower, and I think that the biophilia was almost either the roots or it was one of the initial leaves on the flower. And then all the different practices became the petals of the flower around the value systems and things like that. But I think it's uh, biophilia, and there's a lot that's been happening in the past 10 years around biophilia and bringing biophilia into more mainstream thinking. And what concerns me a little bit about it is that it's also becoming a little bit of pastiche of people thinking, oh yes, now we have wallpaper with trees in an urban environment, or we have these huge leaves and you feel like a little ant walking underneath the leaves. And now we've addressed biophilia. So it becomes incredibly superficial instead of really looking deeply about what it is that those links to nature and that design links to nature actually does. It's a little bit also like the biomorphy aspects of, oh, this is my building. It looks like a durian or a lotus or I won't name specific buildings, but I think many people will know what I'm referring to. So where it becomes a very superficial translation of what is actually a very deep concept in terms of bringing things together. And I'm reminded of a video interview with Glenn Murcutt about his own house. And this
Mm.
is something that I show to the students quite a lot about how he situated in the decisions, the design decisions he made in his own house, and how those link to nature to create that connections to nature, about vista and creating a safe cave space for him to look out into nature. About it's never a direct approach. It's not about symmetry. It's about following the curve of the earth and the shapes of the earth until you enter this space. And it's like once you've entered it, you almost entered a sacred space, the home half being a sacred space in itself. And how that is so subtle. It's not something that people would necessarily put a tick box on and say I'm biophilia, but that for me is really true biophilic design. I think another example is the Kandalama Hotel of Jeffrey Bawa, where the building really becomes part of nature, and it was designed to sort of disappear in nature and really create that kind of a connection to nature. So I think there's danger in how it can become superficially applied, but there's so many beautiful examples. I don't know if you have some favorites.
Yeah, so one of the projects that we talked about in the book was the building where you end up walking through next to a garage through this little alleyway of bamboo, and then you walk into the building and it just unfolds, and there's three stories of light and magic and just this sense of being in a place that holds you to your full potential or allows you to really exist. Yeah, so and I'm completely gone. But I thought of the word, and then I was listening to his name, and then I was listening to you and Robin Boyd. So we're just going to cut
That's it,
that bit.
yes. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So this is a great project. This is a great project by Robin Boyd where it's the Featherston House, and you walk past
Mm,
this nondescript garage through this sort of alleyway of bamboo, and then as you walk into the door, you have this welcome into this amazing
mm,
three-story
mm,
light-filled, timber-filled shape, and it just feels like this is a place of potential. This is a place where I can really step up to who I
mm,
could be. Now, thermally and a whole bunch of other pragmatic issues, there are things about that architecture that don't work, but the concepts of the liminal space and drawing you in and
mm.
filling you with that potential, those are so strong in that project. So that is one of my favorites. And
Yeah.
we also walked with Stephen Keller through Croon Hall, and I remember
Mm.
that being a great experience. But actually, for me, in that whole walk, it was actually the library that was the magical
Yes,
experience
I
for
was
me.
going to say the Beinecke Library. It is, you walk in and it's this incredibly soft, sacred space with all this light, this diffuse light coming through those marble panels. And you are transported to a different world. It's no longer, you can be in a forest, you can be in a forest glade and surrounded by the wisdom of the ages. It is really, for me, it was the kind of sacred space that the cathedrals that were built in Europe, creating that same sense of awe and wonder and play with light to create that sense of awe. It's
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember us walking in there, and one of the security guards came up proudly and said, "Oh, here's a piece of the marble granite material, I
uh,
can't remember, that you can look at and touch." And they were telling us all about this place, and it started raining, and the colors changed from being sort of
yes,
greeny
yes.
browny hues to amazing orangey red hues, and we managed to capture some photos for the book from that. But oh my goodness, that still raises the hairs in the sense.
But I
Yeah.
also think for me, one of the strong things that personally came out of the whole biophilia is the acceptance of natures, of this linkages to the seasons and of life and death and of winter and summer, and that we need to accept that. And for me, that came true, very true in my experiences in working in Japan, in Kyoto. And as part of that initial conference, that we talk about is I had the privilege to go to Kyoto with a Japanese architect, and how Japanese architecture, and particularly traditional Japanese architecture, recognizes this, that it's okay for things to start slowly decaying, for the moss to grow on things, to show us the passage of time. And whereas in modern life, people would come with their power washers and wash the moss off the stones, that this is recognized as the building becoming a part of nature, of reintegrating into nature, and if necessary, collapsing back into nature. And that it links back to those values that we talk about of non-attachment, of not being attached to this object that we've created, but seeing the object as just another node in this endless flow of potential and energy and resources and universal love in many ways.
Mm. I love how you've brought the values back through into this particular chapter, and I'd love to keep that kind of approach in our future podcasts. So, this particular section that we're talking about is all about nature and reconnection to nature. And the biophilia aspect, the reconnection, is really why do we need nature and what does nature give us? But the way that we've just talked about it, it is actually starting to learn, if done properly and not in a gimmicky way, starting to learn to have that humility find that humility again to become part of nature again, to be welcomed back into nature. The next section in the book, which we'll talk about in the next podcast, really is around the learning from nature. So we're appreciating it now, and in the next one, it'll be the learning and talking about things like permaculture and biomimicry and how that has shifted. But I think right now we've talked about lots of projects. We've taught people. Hopefully, they're really interested, and maybe in the future we can talk to some people that have done some biophilic projects and have some further in-depth conversations on this. But other than that, I think let's get on with our day. Thank you everyone for listening, and look forward to seeing you all, speaking to you all at the next podcast.
Thanks, Dominique, and thanks everybody watching, and see you next time.